And hello everyone, welcome to your very first Bootstrap tutorial. Now, if you haven't seen my course on HTML, then I highly recommend you do, because this will build off from that course where we learned HTML and how to use it. Great, so I'm going to assume you have seen that. So first, you probably want to know what exactly is Bootstrap. Well, you can think of Bootstrap as making your HTML look better. For example, if we go here, I'm going to replace this default HTML I have here with a new HTML where our Bootstrap has already been applied. Now I'm going to create a button and say click me. If we save this, you'll see we have a button that says click me. This button is pretty ugly, but with the power of Bootstrap, by just adding this one line here, we have a nice button. A button that just looks much better than the button we had. And in this course, we'll be discovering all of these ways we can make things now look better thanks to Bootstrap. You don't necessarily need to learn Bootstrap. You can learn something like Tailwind CSS or Material UI. I just personally think Bootstrap is still a good place to start. Mainly because I know it and I use it in basically all of my projects if I don't want to do any CSS. Cool, so let's get started with installing Bootstrap. I'm going to get back to my old design here. There. So this right here, this is just our basic HTML page. Nothing special about it. Now you probably need to download Bootstrap. Now you can decide. You can either connect to Bootstrap every time through the internet, which is perfectly fine, or you can download Bootstrap and use it on your machine. One of them is online, the other is offline. So if you have internet connection problems, then I'd recommend downloading it. And I'll show you how to do both methods. So you can just say Bootstrap. And let me just make sure I'm doing this in Google. There we go. Then you'll see a https getbootstrap.com. And you just click on this link. Cool. Now here, this is the online method. You can first copy this and you can go to your HTML page and paste it here at the top. There's also a JavaScript that also has the things you might need. You can copy both of them. I don't know if this is required for the newest Bootstraps, but remember in the older Bootstrap you did need both of these. And you can put them here. Some people like to put this script tag here at the end of the body. That is up to you if you want to do that. I don't really care, so I'm going to leave this here. Once you save this, your page itself wouldn't change. But now if we use that example, where we say button, and then click me, and here we go, class btn primary. And we don't have to worry about what this means yet. Then we have a primary looking button. If your button looks similar to this, then you're good to go. Also, for those of you wondering, we're working with Bootstrap 5. It's the latest one as far as I know. Cool. Now, you can also, if you ever get stuck, click on this Get Started button. And this will take you to the documentation where you can read up on everything you might need to know about Bootstrap. So you can come here if you need to. However, I'm not going to have that open right now because I'm going to be your documentation for this course. Now, if you want to download this, you can just click on this massive download button. And here it will give you everything you can download. So here we can just download both of these by opening them. Or my bad, there we go. You just click on the download button. And here you go. You should see something like this downloading. Once it has finished downloading, you can open this in your file manager. And here, as you can see, I have it. Now, you might not be able to do this out of the box. I'm on Linux, and out of the box, it usually works. If you're on Windows or Mac, you might have to download something to do this first. If you're on Windows, you can get WinRAR. WinRAR allows you to extract .zip files. You can also get 7-zip, or I think it's WinZip or something like that as well. if you don't want to use one RAR. I don't know what you should do if you are on Mac though. But if you go here, we can just say extract to, and we can just extract it to any folder that sounds good. So let's go to downloads, create a new folder, BS for Bootstrap, create, and now we can just extract it in there. We should now have a BS folder which has our Bootstrap inside of it. Inside of this we have our CSS and we have our JavaScript. Now we can take this Bootstrap folder here and we can copy that, so copy, and go to the folder where you want your project to be in. So in my case it would be in documents, trash, BS, and then right here. So there's our Bootstrap. I'm going to rename this to Bootstrap, however, to make it easier. And there we go. So now we have Bootstrap, and inside of it we have CSS and JavaScript. And inside of these, you'll notice there's a lot of items here. The one you're mostly concerned with is this bootstrap.min.css. This is the minified Bootstrap, which I believe is the lightest to load. Same with the JavaScript. You want this Bootstrap bundle min JS. No, not the bundle, but the Bootstrap min JS. There we go. Cool, so I'm going to close this because it already exists here. So to use it, you can go back to your HTML, and I'm just going to resize this maybe a bit smaller with 1. That's much better. Now we can actually see what we're looking at. First, we want to link the CSS file. So we can go link, link, and we can check the CSS one. So you should see something like this. Now we need to replace this with the link towards this Bootstrap CSS file that has a min inside of it. So let's go here and we can go Bootstrap. You can even go /bootstrap, that works as well. And then CSS bootstrap.min.css. So you want to go specifically for this one right here. This navigation here works exactly the same as what you'd use with an image. You can do this as well, that's fine. I just like to do this to say go from this folder specifically, whilst this one also says go from this folder, but we didn't specify it necessarily. So you want to get this one right here, like Bootstrap min CSS. Or the Bootstrap CSS will also work, but go for the min one because that's what I always use anyways. Then we want to link the Bootstrap JavaScript. For that we can go script, and you'll have a tag with script and then source. Inside of the source we want to do the same thing as here. So Bootstrap JavaScript and then bootstrap.min.js. Cool. Make sure you do get the right ones here, because if you get the wrong one it may not work. Cool. So let's save that and let's look at the website. We do get a click me. Let's make sure it works, that we got the right thing, by also going down here, maybe create a break line tag and saying span. And for the span we can maybe say well done. There we go. We can give it a class, and yet again you don't have to understand anything here yet. In the next video I'll cover it more. Badge rounded pill BG success. There we go. So after giving it these, you should see something like this. If this doesn't look like it does here, then I recommend you go redo it, because that means something probably went wrong. But if you have this on your website, then you have followed this course correctly. Whether you choose to do the offline or the online version, it doesn't matter, both will work perfectly fine. in this tutorial, we'll be talking about containers and grids. Containers and grids are basically what makes up some of the most fluid things inside of Bootstrap. By fluid, I mean once this window size changes, it responds and just resizes according to the screen width. Alright, so first let's talk about the container. Now there are two types of container. The first is just a normal container. Remember, you should have Bootstrap linked above here. And this container just is a basic container to hold things. So I can put a button here that says click me, and I can put like a break line tag here, and then I can put some text. Cool. Now if I were to show you how it looks without this container, then you'll see something like this. However, this does look somewhat ugly. But what you could do is you could use this container, and it should have a class of container. You'll notice with everything in Bootstrap, it uses classes to say how things should look. In this scenario, we're saying this should look like a container. If we save this, then you'll notice we now have a little border at the side. And as we resize the screen, the border also resizes. So now that it's a bit bigger, this border is also bigger. If we make the width even bigger, as you can see, it becomes bigger. So yeah, the reason I'm using a div specifically here, now that we're also on the topic, is just because that is usually what is being used. But this can be any container element. In fact, actually any element. So I could go here and make this a section tag. That's perfectly fine. It will work perfectly fine. If it has this class right here, then it can have this class right here. But it is recommended to have this right here be something that contains other elements. The next one is the container fluid, like that. Whilst with container, it resized this space here depending on the width of the window. With container fluid, it will continuously resize that space here. So there's not a one size fits all. So if we were to run this, save it first and then run it, you won't really notice much of a difference, except that now there's a border, but it doesn't get any bigger, like a little margin there. Now the reason behind this is some people would like their website to stay the same size on specific sizes of screen. For example, if the phone screen is this big, then it should have this size of text on it. If it's this big, it should still have that same size of text on it. But if it's bigger than that, then the text should expand and become bigger. This isn't something you have to worry about just yet, but it's something you can take note of, that a container resizes every occasionally, whilst a container fluid resizes continuously. And if you're not sure which one to choose, just choose the one that you think looks best. If you like having this more space here at the side, then choose a container. If you like having a little space here, choose container fluid. And if you don't know at all, just don't put a container there at all. Now if you want the padding in this container, that's this part here, to be bigger, then you can also go here inside of the same class, add a space and say PT5. And this will give it a higher padding. So this means padding, top, and then 5. But yeah, that's just something you might want to take note of. It's not really too important. I never really use it. I just add some CSS, which we'll get to in a future tutorial. You can also add a custom border to your container by saying border. And it is incredibly light. Right there is the border. It's very difficult to see, but it is there. Then you can give it like a dark background by saying BG dark. Now it has a dark background. However, now the problem is that we can't see the text. So then you can say text white to specify that the text should be white. Now I didn't quite explain this MY5. This means add margin on the y-axis and 5 of it. So right here, this would be X from left to right, and Y would be up and down. But yet again, this isn't too important. In this scenario, we're only working with the container, so none of that is too important. It's just things you might want to know about. Cool, and that's the containers. Let's move on to the grid. The grid system is something very, very useful. It allows you to kind of space out what you want to have together. So here I'm going to go inside of this container fluid. This could also be a container, whichever you prefer. Now let's start talking about the columns and the rows, or in this scenario, the grid system. Now, I think the best way to show you what I mean is by showing you WeSchools, because I've always found this to be the best place to actually visualize what is happening. So let me just bring this over here, this example. Here we have the grid system. Every page has 12 grids, 12 items in the grid, 12 columns. You can split these columns up into spaces on how you want to break up your program. And depending on what you choose, you can have up until 12 different columns or one big column. So let me actually show you an example, which I think would be better. Now I'm going to create a row because you have a column and then you have your rows. The columns goes inside of the row because for every row you'll need columns. Then here we can specify a column that is SM. I'm going to explain that in a second. And here we can go 6. And we can make 2 of them. Then here we can put a p tag and specify some lorem. And maybe here we could put a form that has an input of type text and a button. As you can see, it split the page up into 2 sections. One section for 6 columns, another section for 6 columns. And this is inside of a row. Each row has 12 columns. So if you do this, then now you'll have 2 rows with 12 columns. This doesn't have to add up to 12. For example, you could say 3 and 6. That's perfectly fine. Now this one will look like this because this only uses up 3 of the 12 and this only uses up 6 of the 12, which is a total of 9. You shouldn't go over your limit though. If you put the 9 here, then it will just get confused because there's only 12 columns per row, and now we have 15 columns. So you should make sure to not go above 12, but you can go below 12. If you were to put a 12 here, then this will take up this entire row. And then these two would be split because they're in their own row, taking their own space. You could make this a 4, and we could make this an 8. Now it will take this space. And depending on how we resize the page, for example like this, you'll notice it still changes as it should. But if we resize it to be smaller, then at some point it will all go underneath each other. That is called responsive web design, and that is what this does. This creates a column. This is how small the screen has to be, and this is how many columns you're getting. If we were to make this an LG, and this one as well in LG, then this will break up once the screen is no longer considered large. So as we go like this, then now it's there, but once the screen reaches a point where it's no longer considered large, it will break up and it will go underneath each other. Unlike these two, which are using SM for small, this one is using LG for large. So we can go like that. I usually just stick with MD. So MD. So if you don't know which to choose, then just choose MD. That's a good rule of thumb to have, because MD means medium. However, you could also tell Bootstrap to choose one for you. And then you can just do something like call. And this will automatically resize this one to use the remaining space. So if we were to now go like this, let's just make this SM again. SM. And let's make this 4 or 3 instead of 8, now this one will take all of the space and leave that open. So this will then automatically take up the remaining space because it has no other things after it. If you were to take this one away as well, then it'll take up equal amount of space, and you can add as many extra columns as you want, and it will add that amount of space as required. And that's the basic grid system. It's really that simple. If you don't always remember what you could do with the grid system, I do recommend checking out WeSchools because they have a great just show of how you can use the grid system. And I'll always love how they show you that. So here, like, look at all this they show you. They explain how all of this works. I did the same just now. I just gave you a more physical example. So here, or let Bootstrap handle the layout, and then they give you an example. And here they show you how every column gets used. So if you are confused, or if you maybe forget, or anything like that, then with the grid system, I definitely recommend checking out WeSchools. But yeah, now the rest of the facts you might just want to know is that the grid system, it resizes to fit the screen, as we said here. The reason that is beneficial is because you can have multiple sizes of screen. So let's create another 2 columns here. We full screen this, and we go here. Now on a 4K screen, it will look like this, which doesn't look too great, but we're not focusing on massive screens. On a normal laptop screen, it will look like this. On a laptop screen, it will look like this. So this is a large laptop screen, this is a normal laptop screen. And then on a tablet screen, it will break up, and this one will now go to the bottom. Then this, and you could of course force it to have specific sizes for each. For example, here you can say free or SM free. Whoa. And here as well, like that. It will give you the same output, but in this scenario, since they're all ASM free, they will now all fit into the same screen. And once you go a little bit bigger, as you can see, they'll split up a bit. But then there we go. Then once you get to a mobile screen with a mobile device with a large screen, it will look like this. It will split up and it will fall underneath each other instead of next to each other. Since if they were next to each other, it will look absolutely horrendous. And then once we get to the smallest screen, you'll notice it also does that. But without Bootstrap, so if we were to remove this Bootstrap here, like that, and let's also remove this row here, just to show you, then there we go, it goes bigger, 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 and as you can see, it's still underneath each other. Bigger, this one, still underneath each other, bigger, so it doesn't really respond to different screen sizes. It just kind of lays there flat without any special ability. But yeah, we'll cover this more once we do the project we're going to do in Bootstrap. But for right now, I think this is perfectly fine. This is just so you know you can put a grid system on your page. And a grid system allows you to say when your page should split from using everything next to each other to everything underneath each other. You can practice with this on your own and see how you can make your websites look better by using a grid system instead of just regular HTML. And you can play with the containers as well to see which container fits your website the best. Now, typography is basically text. We can make text look a specific way depending on how or on what classes we give it. For example, let's maybe remove all of this. And let's create a p tag that says hello world. We can create an h1 tag that says the same. There we go. So now I have a p tag that says hello world and an h1 that says hello world. Now, when we use Bootstrap, usually we don't really say h1, h2, h3, or we do, but we only say it for a specific header. For other things that should be the same size but should not be the same priority as in H1 or in H2 or in H3 or whatnot, for those that just need that size and same properties, we can use a p tag. The idea behind it is that we don't overuse H1 tags and H2 tags. We only use them where they are needed. Otherwise, we can use styling for them instead. So let's go here to our p tag and say class H1. Now, both of these look exactly the same. However, this one is a p tag, meaning to the computer's eye, it will look like a piece of text, just a paragraph. Whilst to our eyes, it would look like a header. So we already have a main header for the web page, but we want another header of the same size, but it's not a header. Then we can use this. And of course you have your H2 and your H3 all the way down to H6. And that's just for the header. Now, sometimes you need something that stands out more than a normal heading. Like this H1, it doesn't really stand out that much. Compared to normal p tags it does, but in general, not really. But something else you could use to make it stand out more is giving a p tag or an H1 tag or whatever you would like to give this class to, the class of display, and then the size, where 1 is of course the largest and 6 would be the smallest. So now it's pretty big compared to a normal H1. And then just to give a size comparison, if we put a normal hello world here, so there we go. So this is the biggest size that basically Bootstrap gives you out of the box compared to the generally smallest. And this of course goes to H2, H3, H4, all the way down to H6. You also have a class for small text. So now text will look extra small, a little bit smaller than a normal p tag. It's basically a stand-in for the small tag. So you can rather use a class with small. So instead of having to use a small tag instead of a p tag, you can just use a span. Take this span, go here. Now you take this class and you move it to this span instead. And now this world will be a tiny bit smaller. Let's just go like H1 or something. Tiny bit smaller. And yeah, that's the benefit of instead of using an actual small tag, you can just use a class. A lot of times people will just throw out all types of elements and just use a class, but it's still good to use an element in some cases. But if you do want to and you just want the styling, you don't care about the element, then this is a great way to go. You also have for mark, so something to replace the mark tag, which basically highlights it. It's very difficult to see, but it's a very light yellowish color. You'll probably be able to see it better if I go here and say style, background color, and let's just make it like a dark color. There we go, so now you can see it a bit better. You also have a special tag for block quotes. So let me just add some lorem here. Now here we can go and say class is equal to block quote. And now it will have some special styling because it's a block quote. You also have a block quote footer. So if we go here and say lorem and just remove most of the lorem. For like if this is like the person who said it, then here we can say class block quote and footer. And this will have a little special styling for it as well because it's the footer of a block quote. Cool. Now I'm going to speed through some of these because there's quite a lot. So I'm just going to maybe keep the lorem and remove everything else. We also have a lead to make a paragraph stand out a tiny bit more. And I'm also going to have another paragraph just for example's sake. Okay, so this is the normal paragraph and this is the lead. You also have a text end to specify that the text should align to the end instead of the beginning. You also have the opposite of text start, and this will send, or it will basically do what it usually does, But in some languages, they start reading from right to left and not left to right. So you might want to use this, and I think it's Arabic. You also have no wrap, which will remove wrapping. So now we can just go like that, and as you can see, it doesn't wrap anymore. It's just one long piece of text. You also have lowercase. So now there's no more uppercase letters. Everything is lowercase. You also have uppercase. Now everything's uppercase. If I were to make that L a lowercase l, then I can go capitalize. And now it has a capital L. Everything actually has a capital letter now. Not just the first one, everything. Bootstrap also has some special styling for specific elements. For example, let's start here. Let's create this p tag. We can remove this class. And now if we were to go here and just comment out this Bootstrap like that, then now if we go down here and say ABBR for abbreviation, then now we'll have this little thing here, which if we hover over it, it just gives us a bunch of dollars. It doesn't really look that good. But when we bring in Bootstrap, then now when we hover over it, it has a little question mark and then it displays it. So it gives a little bit of extra styling there. So you don't necessarily need to add a class. Bootstrap has tons of these, but I'm not going to go through every one of them. But let's do one more before we go. So here we also have the KBD for the keyboard command. And now you can put things in here like a keyboard. For example, CTRL plus C, and that means copy. If we do that, normally it looks pretty trash. You can't really tell it's anything different. It looks a tiny bit different, but it's pretty trash. But with Bootstrap, it has really great styling, and I do love that. Bootstrap has tons of these already built in. Usually you don't have to worry too much about learning these. You'll kind of find them along the way as you use them. For example, if you use the keyboard command, even if I didn't tell you here, once you use Bootstrap, you'll be like, wow, that's actually pretty good looking. Bootstrap provides a ton of colors, and I'll point out the most important ones to remember. But they do provide a ton of colors out of the box, so you don't have to add color to your text manually using CSS if you know how to use that. But let's go here and let's actually use it. I'm going to remove this KBD there. And now we have just some normal text. Now we can add a class. And here's a few things we can use here. For example, text and then muted. It's pretty self-explanatory. It will make the text look a bit more muted. We can actually have a p tag here for all of them to kind of view the difference. Lorem. There we go. So that's the difference. It will make it stand out less. Then there's text primary. This is one of the colors you want to remember. Primary. It gives it a nice bluish color, and you use this primary blue with a lot of types of things in Bootstrap, so I would recommend you remember primary. Also success. This gives it a nice greenish color, as you can see there. Also another color you should preferably remember. And info. This makes it also a nice blue, but it's a more lightish blue. And yeah, just also remember info. Then there's warning. And this is red, or not red, but yellow. And it just basically shows a warning. It's pretty self-explanatory as well. Also one of those you should remember. Then there's danger. And danger is red to show some dangerous text. Also another one you should remember. And lastly, secondary. And this gives you not really a muted color, but it's gray. It gives you a gray color. And this is the last one you should remember. The rest of this you don't have to remember that much. You also have white. And this will make the text white, of course. So you can't see it on a white background. Then you have dark. And this will make the text dark. It does look a little bit darker, but I think this is just normal color. That might just be my eyes playing tricks on me. light. Light is what you usually use if you have a dark theme on your page, then you can use light, which isn't purely white. It's just more light. Cool. Now if we can also go black, and this will give a black text color. Now you can also give these like certain opacities, like 50% opacity, meaning it's going to be see-through 50%, as you can see. And you can do the same with white. That will also make it see-through 50%. Not that it will matter on a light background, but yeah, it will make it see-through. You can also give them background colors. I'm going to add another class here because just to show you, you can add multiple classes on one element. You don't necessarily just have to add one class per element. You can add multiple classes. For example, BG and primary. And this will make the background the primary color. And let's just keep the text white. We don't necessarily need that. You also have success. And you have all of the other colors I showed you before. You have info, warning, danger, secondary, dark, light, white. But I'm not going to go through all of them every time because there's a lot. And that is basically how to change your text and their background color. Now, here is something I actually kind of started talking about in my HTML course, but I never really got too deep into it because we didn't really know a lot about HTML yet. But this right here is a div. And as I said, div contains a bunch of other items. Now, I'm pretty sure if I were to remove this, we won't see this color anymore. Yeah. And we can just say style, width, and here we can say 50 pixels, and then height, 50 pixels. And this will just size it up to be 50 pixels by 50 pixels in width and height. That's all this styling here does. Now you can add a bunch of cool things here. For example, let's keep the, let's not keep the color. Or let's make it secondary, like that, so you can still see it. We can actually zoom in a bit. So here is our square. And let's also just give it a margin. You don't have to worry about any of this. There we go. So you don't have to worry about the styling here at all. We'll do that in a future tutorial. But you just have to worry about this. This here just makes like the square be here. And this size. Now, we can add things like a border by saying border. And now I can also remove this background secondary. Now, as you can see, it has a very light border around it. You can also specify if there should be a border or not by specifying a number next to it like 0, and that means no border. You can use this with other things, for example, allow a border, but then border top 0. Now there's a border everywhere except on the top of the square. And you can do this with basically all sides, so bottom, and now there's not on the bottom. Start. And that means there's not on the start here, and then end is not at the end. Like that. You can also specify for just one side, like border top, and now there's just a border at the top, or border bottom, or you could specify more than one, border top as well, and now there's a border at bottom and top, but not at start and end. You can change the border width by the number. For example, border, and then add a number here, for example, 3. And now the width will be a bit more, as you can see there. You can go up until about 5, and it will give you a pretty thick border. And let's just add a normal border as well, so you can see the whole border. There we go. You can change the border color with all of the colors we have listed before. So, border primary. This will make it bluish. And you can change it to danger, that'll make it red, and you can make it info, warning, success, secondary, all of those colors there. Yet again, not going to go through all of them. You can also make the borders look pretty neat, such as rounded. This will make the border a bit rounded, which I usually like seeing. And you can also specify only like at the top. It's only rounded at the top, but at the bottom it still has like this pointiness. And you can of course say bottom, end, start. However, for example, end will now only do it here, but here it's still pointy. and start and wherever. It's basically the same pattern. You just give it a different word at the start. So rounded and then top, bottom, start, end. You also go rounded and then circle. And this will make it a nice circle. You also go pill. And this will make it a pill. However, your width will need to be longer or more than your height, or other way around, because now it's a pill. But if you were to say circle, then now it will be a weird circle. So there's a difference between pill and circle, just take note. So this is pill, circle will not look this good. And here, of course, if you were to make this longer, then it will be other pill. So now it will be a pill that looks like that and not sideways. Cool. You can also specify how round it should be. For example, 1. Now it will be a tiny bit rounded, but if you go up until 5, then it will be no rounded at all. So 1, it will be the most rounded. 4 would be a little bit rounded. 3, a little bit rounded. 2, a little bit more rounded. 1, bit more rounded. So that's pretty cool. Now one thing that I do like, so let me just remove all of that, is sometimes I like to float my content, which just means align it to the left or to the right. Now let's say I have 2 buttons. Now the first button says click me 1. Second one says click me 2. And of course we could just make them a little bit better. Like that. And they're very big. Let me just zoom out a bit. Because there's our buttons. Now here we could say class is clear fix. And this will allow us to use 2 other classes. Class and float. And then where you want to float it to. So start or end. Start and this can be end. Now these buttons are floated next to each other. One is at the end, one is at the front. And that's what float does. This will now float at the start. If we were to remove this, not much would change, as you can see. But if we were to remove this end here, then it will now no longer float at the end. But depending on how your website is built, you might want to actually use float start as well. You also make it a bit more supportive on smaller screens. For example, float, and in the size, for example, LX, or no, XL for X large. Now it doesn't float unless the screen is X large. Let me actually go LG, otherwise my screen might not be big enough. Now, if I were to resize my screen, then give it a second, and actually my screen can't go big enough. Let me go MD instead. MD, there we go. Now if I resize it, as you can see, it now floats, but once my screen is this big, it doesn't float anymore. So you can make it only float if the screen is a specific size. And I do believe we did talk a little bit about this when we talked about our containers and grids. So if you haven't seen that video, I do recommend you do. But of course you have all of the same ones here. For example, you have SM, MD, LG, XL, XXL for XX large. And then you of course have, last but not least, float none. This means you don't float at all. We do not allow you to float, as you can see. Now, one cool thing you can also do is we can go here and say BG, and then let's just go danger. And now we can see the background. Let's also remove a button there. And remove clear fix. And remove float start. There we go. Now this basically gives us a nice background, right? We can also say W for the width, and then how much this width should be. So 25 would mean basically 25% of the website length. So if we go like this, as you can see, it's just kind of 25% here. And then we have 50, which means 50%. So it takes up 50%. And then 75. So that takes up 75% of the website width. And then 100. And this will take up the full width. So that's kind of how to change the width of something. You can do the same with height. So here we could go H instead of W, now it would be as high as it can go. However, due to how HTML is basically created, we will have to make this body style height 100 VH. You don't have to worry about what that means, but now it can go full 100. If we make it 25, then it can only go 25 the height. You don't have to worry about what this means. It just makes the whole body width or height full height and not just based on what's inside of it. But you don't have to worry about that right now. That's CSS crap. Cool. Now you can add margin and padding, where margin would be the outside. For example, the space between this one and this edge here, that's padding. Where the space between this and this here is margin, in a sense. You can add margin to stuff by going here. We can just say class and then m and then how much of a margin you want to give it. So here, 1 would give you this. As you can see, a nice small margin. If you go 5, then we'll give you a nice big margin where it's the outside. So it's everything outside of this. As you can see, this is a margin of 5. However, the padding is the inside, not the outside, but the inside. We'll go deeper into the padding and margin in CSS tutorial, but for now, you just need to know margin is outside, padding is inside. Now, if we go here, we say P, they will make the padding that size and not the margin. And we can, of course, add both. Now, it will look like this. Both paddings are both are basically the same amount. I'm going to remove this class stuff here and also this padding stuff, or we can keep that padding. It's actually not that bad, and we actually keep some of the margin as well. Now you can also add a shadow to stuff. At first you have your shadow and none, which basically means no shadow at all. Then you have your shadow SM for a small shadow, and then your shadow, which is a normal shadow. And then you of course have your, if you go like that, then you can see it's not very noticeable, but it is there. And then you of course have your shadow LG for a large shadow. Nice. You can also make things visible or invisible, where if we were to remove all of this, then here we could say invisible, and that will make this button invisible. The button is still there, so the button is no longer visible to our eyes. If we make it visible, then it will of course be visible. It's by default visible. A special case of buttons, however, is you can go btn close. And this will make the button a nice close button if we just remove this text here. Some people really struggle to make a button look like that, but they don't know that Bootstrap has this built in for them, this nice close button. Nice. Now sometimes you want text to only be able to be read by screen readers. So I'm going to make a p tag here and put some lorem in it. Now let's say you have some text, but you don't want people to see it, but you want it to be there as extra context for screen readers. Well, then you can say class and visually hidden, meaning we can't see it, but screen readers still can. So now screen readers will still read this, it can still read this, but we cannot see it anymore. So this is a default table in HTML. I believe we have already covered this in the HTML course. In HTML, a table looks absolutely disgusting. Like, it's very difficult to see what is actually what. Once this table becomes massive, it's going to become very difficult to tell where's what and what's where. So, Bootstrap has made it easy for us to make a table look good by saying class table. As easy as that, our table already looks 10 times better than what it did. Everything is way more readable with everything nicely spaced out. We can make it look even better by saying table striped. Now, I want to say second one, but it's actually first and then, but every uneven number one is a little bit darker than every other one, every second one. And that makes it a tiny bit easier to actually read what is inside of this table. You can also add more things like table bordered, and this will make the table more bordered. If we were to go here and say M5, then here you can actually see the border. If we were to scroll a little bit, yeah, here you can see a little bit of a border. Now sometimes you want a striped layout, but you don't want the stripes to be seen unless you hover over a specific item here. Well, that can be table hover. Now there will only be striped ones once you hover over them, where it will kind of show you that this one is the one you selected. Tables also has automatic dark theme implemented, so table dark is an option, and now you can still hover over it and still see the one you chose. And you can also do a striped, so table striped, to still have the striped version, which is pretty neat. Now I'm going to go back to the light version. You can also remove all of the borders and crap from a table if that's what you're into. So table borderless. And now there's no borders, it's just all in nice rows and columns, which is still better than what the default HTML gives you. You can also give every specific row its own little color. For example, let's also just remove this borderless because I like seeing my border. So going here to TR, we can then say class table primary. So it has all the same colors we have been covering like in every video. So now the first one will be a bluish color, and we can maybe do the second one as well, and we can make this one maybe danger, and now we'll have a danger color. And there's all of the other colors, so success, info, warning, secondary, light, dark, and whatnot. Nice. You can also make a table nice and small by going table SM, and that will make the table a tiny bit smaller. Depending on how big the table is, this might actually make a massive difference, but in this scenario, it doesn't make a big difference at all. And yeah, that's it for tables. Not a very big topic, but it does really make the default HTML table look better. So I highly recommend you use this if possible, instead of just the default crappy table, which looks absolutely awful. So I have an image here. You can get any image you want. It doesn't really matter what image you have. I just have a random image here. And we're going to be using this image because we'll be working with images. Let's first bring the image into our website. So image source is equal to image.jpg. And there we go. And here we have the image. It's a little big, so I'm going to just say width is equal to 400. That should work. There we go. Okay, so here's our image. I'm just also going to give it a class of M3, just to give it a margin so you can see the sides. Cool. So this is a normal image. Now, the nice thing about Bootstrap is it has a lot of things out of the box just for working with images. So first we could just go rounded. And this will make the sides a little bit rounded. You might not have seen that change because it's not a lot. But if I were to remove that and I were to just do this, then as you can see, it's no longer rounded. It's a very fine detail, but it does make a tiny bit of a difference depending on what website you're building. You can also go rounded circle. I never really find myself using this one, but you might have a use case for this where you need your image to be in the shape of a circle, but not a perfectly circular circle. You also have your image thumbnail, and this will add a little white border around it. So here we could just go style is equal to ground color and just make it black. And I will see it has a little white border around it. If I were to remove this, then the border is gone. But if I were to add this, then there is a border. So sometimes you want to have a border and this just works for it. The nice thing about what Bootstrap gives you is it allows you to immediately float content. Now, when you float something, you're basically making it so other content can be where it is, but it's floating to a specific side of the page. It's above everything else in a sense. To give you an example, if I go P here and just say lorem, then here I have some text. Now here I could say float start. The reason you might want something to float is if I were to just add another one of these images, and let's just also shrink it to maybe half its size. There we go. Let's just go like this. So now we have two of them. If we say float end, then one will float here and one will float here. Bootstrap allows us to immediately add floating to our images. And you'll notice the text starts here, right next to the image. So we could also go like this, and I will notice the text is right next to the image here, all of the text. And then if we go like this, the text starts right here next to the image. And that's what floating allows, and it's very powerful. Even today, I still use floating a lot, even if I'm not that into web design. And Bootstrap makes it easy to instantly float your images, which is always useful. Now, one thing people often complain about when they work with images is that it's difficult to center it. Even in CSS, sometimes people struggle centering content. Well, in Bootstrap, it's automatically there for you. You just go mx auto, which means margin on the x-axis, meaning from left to right, is automatically guessed. And you won't see anything if you save it. But then if you go D block, then it will be there. D block stands for display block. You don't really need to know what display block is just yet, but just know that D block allows you to kind of make something a full block of content. And last but not least, the thing I find the most important when working with images is to make it responsive. And it's something I had a lot of trouble with when I just did CSS, because making an image responsive is a massive pain in the butt. But Bootstrap automatically adds this feature for us. So here we could just say image fluid, and let's also just increase it a bit. Let's remove this width constraint because we don't need it anymore. It will now automatically resize to the page size. If I were to remove this, then it will scale to a massive size. But if I added that, it will scale to the page size. So as you can see, the more my page increases and decreases, the more the image increases and decreases. And that's very powerful because sometimes images are just too big, and just using image fluid fixes that immediately. Sometimes you want to display an alert on your website, and I love using alerts when it comes to Bootstrap. It's one of my favorite features because usually you'd have to design and write these just basic messages yourself, but in Bootstrap they all come packaged in already. So you just send a notification and bloop, there it pops up on the screen. So let's get to it. Now, to create one, we can just create a div and div. There we go. And we can just put some text in here. For example, success. You have signed up. Okay, now we have a message that displays success. You have signed up whenever the user signs up to the website. Now what we can do is we can add a few classes to make it look better. So class, and then we can say alert to specify we want an alert, and in the type of alert. In this case, we want success. And boom, now you have a little green thing here that it can be seen as a notification. It does span the whole page, but of course you can change that if you wanted to. Another thing you can do to make it leave a bit more of an impact is you can use the bold tag, and that will make success bold and say success, this is a success. And of course there's a lot more you can do. For example, error, or I think this is danger, not error. And then we just go here and say you have been hacked, and not success but danger. There we go. Danger, you have been hacked. And it's red, so they know it is something important. And of course you can do this with info, warning, primary, secondary, dark and light. All of the colors we have discussed up until now, they all work in here. So there we go, dark, then it will of course be a darkish color. I'm going to keep it danger, just because I think that looks pretty nice. Now sometimes you want to leave a link that people can access when you show them a notification. Well, we can do that here as well, and there is special styling for it as well. So we can just go create an A tag, and here we can say how to fix this. Now by default it will just kind of look trash and not a very good link, and of course we can just say href is equal to hashtag. And as you see, it just doesn't quite fit in with the message here. You're saying danger, you have been hacked, and in this random blue color here that doesn't really fit in with the color we already have. Well, we can just say class is equal to alert link. And now it is bold and has underlining and whatnot because this is a link. And it will automatically inherit the color here. So if we say success, then it will be greenish. If we say info, then it will be bluish. Now one thing that is also very useful is sometimes you don't always want this here to be here. I'm just going to remove that there. Sometimes you want to be able to close this notification. So instead of it just always being open, you want them to be able to click a button and it will close. You can do that by just going here and then adding alert dismissible. And this just means the alert should be dismissible. You can dismiss this alert. And this will allow you to dismiss it. However, we cannot dismiss it quite yet. We can add a button. And in here we can just say type is button. You don't necessarily need to specify the type. I'm just very used to it. And of course, as we know, we can just say class is equal to btn or btn close. And this will make the button a close symbol, as you can see there. But clicking it won't quite do anything just yet. To close it, we can say data BS for Bootstrap and then dismiss is equal to alert. And now if we click it, it will dismiss the alert. And if we refresh there, click it, it will dismiss it. That is incredibly nice because usually when you want something like this to happen, you have to write your own JavaScript to make this happen. But Bootstrap has already written that JavaScript for you. So you add one class, which is an optional class. You don't even have to add that class. And then you add one attribute and boom, problem is solved. This can be closed. And this is why I love the alert so much, because with just this example, you have implemented something that usually takes quite a while to do and get right. But here it's already designed. It can already be closed. It already has styling applied to it. Everything is just perfect. And of course, you can also add a few extra classes for animation. So fade, as well, of course, fade it if we were to refresh. And let's maybe add show as well. There we go. Now if you click it, it will fade out. You need to add show to make sure that it shows this here, because fade will kind of try and hide it. But when you click this button, it's going to try and close it. And when it tries and close it, it's going to execute this fade. Now, bloop, it will fade out, which is very nice. And you can use a bunch of these fade and show classes with a bunch of other elements as well. It's not limited to just the alert. So this is a normal HTML button. I'm just going to maybe go m-2. Okay, that will just give it a margin. If you maybe missed that tutorial, so now we just have a little bit of a margin. Okay, so this is just a normal HTML button. It's pretty gross, and I've never really liked how this look. Now, with Bootstrap, you already have an inbuilt class for buttons. By just saying btn, you already create a button. Now, of course, this button doesn't look very good because it's invisible, but it's a basic button. To add more styling to a button, you can of course go btn and then all of the colors we have covered so many times in the past. For example, primary. And now it will be a nice bluish color. Or info. Now it will be also bluish but lighter blue. Dark for a dark themed one. Light for a light themed one. And then of course you have link if you have a linked button. It's still a button, but it looks like a link. Now, if you remember my HTML tutorial, you can also use buttons in multiple ways, and this applies to Bootstrap as well. For example, if we have an input that is of type submit, and this is a button, it's a submit button, you can add this right here, that class. You can add that. We don't need to add this margin though. And let's go here, instead of link, we say success. And now you have a success button, even though it's an input. Same with links, because they can also be seen as buttons. So if we go here and create a link, we can say class, and let's just add some default text here. And if we add a button class to it, such as btn danger, then now we have a red button, even though this is actually an A tag. Nice. Now, I usually don't use this as much. These buttons that are as filled. Usually I prefer to have my buttons outlined. And usually I would add that styling myself. But Bootstrap has this styling built in, so it comes out of the box. By going here and instead of saying button warning, or button and whichever color, you in the middle add outline. And this will add an outline instead of the button fully making it that color. So now if we go primary, we now have a bluish button. If we hover over it, it fades into the full button color. And I love that so much. Now you could put any color here yet again. You are not limited to any of that. And I love doing this a lot. You can also give buttons specific sizes. For example, this is the medium size. It's the default. You can also make it larger by going btn and then LG, and this will make the button extra large. As you can see there, it's sized up a bit. It would be easier to see if we remove the outline though, so let's just go like that. As you can see, it's nice and big. If I remove this, it's nice and small. But it can also go smaller. So if we go here and say instead of LG, we say SM, then it's even smaller. So if you really want small buttons, then you can accomplish that with these few commands. So just btn LG and then btn SM to make them a specific size. Sometimes you also want your buttons to take up the entire width. You can do that by going here and creating another element with the class dgrid and then moving the button in there, and this will make the parent basically full, and it will make the button be full as well. You can also add btn block, and this will make sure that the button is always this full width by making it in a blocked scope. Now sometimes you will have multiple buttons like this, where they all say click me. You can then go and give it a gap. For example, gap 1, gap 2. And the higher you go, of course, the larger the gap between the buttons would be. And that's very nice. Cool. So that's if you want to make buttons be the full width that it can be, by just adding dgrid to its parent element and then to the button the btn block, which is optional, but usually you'd use that as well. Okay. Sometimes you don't want a button to be clicked. And usually, to accomplish this, you just go disabled. And this will disable the button. However, what if you wanted to do this with an A tag? You wanted to disable, in a sense, the link. So here we go here and we say class is equal to btn primary. And of course we say link. Now, how would you disable this? Because if I were to try and type disabled here, it's not even going to autocomplete for me because you can't disable a link. Instead, you can add a class to make it look disabled by saying disabled. And now it will look disabled as well. But take note, it's still clickable. It just applied styling. So you should take note of that. It just kind of shows it that it's disabled. Now this applies to normal buttons as well. If you didn't add this disabled here, you could also say disabled. And it will still look disabled, but it won't actually be disabled when you click it. Then you also have your active, and this just means make it look active. So I believe if you didn't add disabled here, that will still look disabled. So active will make it look active, and disabled will make it look disabled. And this, of course, isn't limited to just the button. It can be used on multiple different elements, like we saw with the A tag. And it also, sometimes you want to kind of make your button be a little bit of a loader, because sometimes you're fetching data from the database or something like that, and your button isn't quite clickable yet, but you want to make it obvious by making it a loader and displaying a loader inside. Well, we can do that. I'm just going to remove these classes, and in here inside of the button we can add a new element called span. And we can give it a class of spinner border. And this will give it a spinner, so it will look like a loader. And you can of course make it smaller by going spinner border, and I'm just going to copy that, spaced SM, and that will make it a bit smaller. So if that loading is a bit too big, you can use that to make it smaller. And you probably have algae as well to make it extra big, or I don't think so, no, doesn't look like it. Yeah, so you can use SM to make it smaller. And you can of course still add some text, for example, loading, ... and now we'll say loading next to that loader. Although that looks very weird, so let's make it smaller again, -SM. And that looks normal. Otherwise you'll have to increase the text size to make it look more normal. And this also works on disabled buttons. So if we were to add a class disabled here, or to make it disabled fully, so disabled, then it will still work. And of course you can change this loader to be something other or else than a spinner by going spinner grow. And this will make it a growing spinner. And there's of course more, but these are ones we'll be talking about most. And this one is also very big, so you can do the same and just say SM, and now it will be a bit smaller. Which spinner you use doesn't actually ever matter, it's up to your preference. Nice. Now, sometimes you have multiple buttons, but you want to group them together so they almost look like one button, but they're just buttons that aren't spaced out. For example, let's go here and say, this one can say Android, and this one can say iOS, and this can say KaiOS, which are all valid operating systems for mobile devices. Now by default, there are 3 separate buttons, which looks good, but they can also be seen as a category, so it would be nice if we could group them together and make them almost look like one big button. To do that, we can create a div with the class name btn group, and this will group the buttons together. So now if we go like this, and of course we remove this margin, otherwise it's going to apply margin to all of them. And we can actually just add a margin here, so M2 or M2. There we go. So now it looks like one button, and without this div, it will of course look like this, so it will still be split. So that looks almost like one button, but it isn't. There are 3 different buttons. It's just a nice way to make them look. If you were to add another button, it will just be appended onto them, so you can add as many as you want. If you were to only have 2 buttons, then it will still work perfectly fine. So this is a very nice way to group your buttons. It highly depends on the situation as to where you'd want to group them, but usually it's more dependent on styling. Do you think it looks good or bad? And just like with everything, you can make it bigger or smaller by just going like this, pasting, and then going -lg. That will make it bigger, and by going -sm, that will make it smaller. Yet again, up to personal preference. It is also sometimes seen that you want to stack them vertically instead of horizontally, because this is horizontal. Sometimes you want to stack them from up to down instead from left to right. Well, you can by just adding vertical. And forgive me, I can't spell vertical. There we go. And now they're stacked on top of each other instead of next to each other. You're of course not limited to just one. You can have multiple, and they don't need to all be vertical. They can also be horizontal. You're not limited at all. Now a badge is almost like when you open up a website and there's maybe like a notification badge that like saying 1 or new or something like that. That's a badge. It is a small thing to maybe catch your attention. And we'll see this in a second. Now if I go h1 and just put some thing here, for example, your feed. And let's say your feed is a new feature we added to the website. So we want to make it known to people that this is new. To do that, we can add a span with the class of badge. And then that's actually all we need. We just need the badge class. And we can say new because it's new. Now I won't really see anything because it's currently in a different color. But if we were to add a background color, for example, BG secondary, then now it says new. And the nice thing about a badge is it scales depending on what text you have here. For example, if we say H5, it's going to scale to the size of that H5. If we say P, it's going to scale to that P tag. I'm going to say H5 just because then I don't have to zoom in, or H4 is also good, as you can see. And you can of course give it different styles. For example, success is also a very common use because something is new, so it's a success, you know. And you have dark, and you have all of the other colors we have already covered a ton of times over the course of this tutorial. Now they are not limited to just being this ugly looking square thing. You can also make them a pill. Now to do that, you can just say rounded pill. And now it's a round pill. Now usually it would look a bit better, the pills at least, when they're not used with text. So now it's just a pill. And you can say, I am cool. And that can be like a badge you put on someone's profile. Maybe like a tag they have on their Tinder profile that says, well, when someone types in something, what should they get? A pill. And yet again, you can use all of the colors you want here. Danger. It doesn't matter. All of the colors work. And then as I said when we started the tutorial, you'll usually see a badge on a notification or something like that. Somewhere like that. Well, let's create that. Let's create a button that people can click. Button. And this button can just contain BTN and then BTN secondary. I think that should look good. And here we can say messages. And now it's just a button that shows messages. And we can of course just give it a little bit of a margin. Now this is usually at the bottom of the screen, or this has maybe like a message logo. or something, but we have yet to get to images or icons in Bootstrap. But usually this would be like your messengers. Imagine this is a message logo, like a notification logo. Now usually they'd have like a little number at the side, which is a badge, and we can add a badge like that as well by going span, then adding our badge class, and then our BG danger. Now usually you want to use BG danger to kind of grab the user's attention, because red grabs the attention of people, because if they see red, they kind of look at it. They try, their eyes goes there first. So you want to say, hey, you have like 5 messengers here, and then I can see it says 5. Maybe not secondary, maybe primary. That also looks good, but they all look trash, but it's fine. Maybe even success. Yeah, I mean, let's go primary. It's fine. Anyhow, so now there's a little badge there that says you have 5 notifications. So let's just maybe change this to messages, just so it looks a bit more. There we go, a bit more realistic. And of course you can say pill rounded to make it a bit more round, or not pill rounded, but rounded pill, of course. There we go. And now you have that iconic round notification tag you usually see on apps when you look at your home screen. That's a badge. Now, a lot of times you want to show the user progress, or maybe just show them how that something's busy loading. And that's fairly easy to do in Bootstrap. So first we have a progress div. And this will just contain the progress bar itself, because the progress bar has like a little background invisibility thing going on. And then in here, and this will of course just give us nothing, but then in here we can create another div with the class name of progress bar, because this would be the bar. And then you can give it a width. For example, style is equal to width 70%. So if it's 70% full. And one thing we should maybe include is right here in Bootstrap, we should have a JS bundle. As you can see here, Bootstrap bundle js.min. Do we have a min? No, we don't have a min specifically, but there we go. Bootstrap bundle min.js. We want that, otherwise it won't work. So bootstrap.bundle.min.js. There we go. And here I forgot to go progress, not progress. And there we go. Now we have a little progress. Let's just maybe give it a margin of 2 so we can see it. There we go. So as you can see, there's a little progress bar right there. You might want to just give this a class of BG secondary so we can see it. There we go. And you see there's a little progress bar. And this is much easier managed than progress bars in HTML. Because all you need to do is you need to change the styling here. To instead of being 70%, we can make it 50%. And this is a lot easier, personally for me, to manage and get everything correct. And this can, of course, go up to 100%, and then it will take 100% of the width. And with HTML progress bars, they were usually just limited. You couldn't really style them. You couldn't actually touch them at all. And oftentimes, they just won't even work. So, here you have the option to actually style them a lot. For example, let's say you want to have a small progress bar. Well, usually I don't like bring CSS in here, but style, and then height, and just make that 10 pixels. And then we can just make this width, maybe 80%. And then also make the height here 10% or pixels. And it should be a style. And now it's smaller. And that was super easy. All we had to do was add a style tag and say height is 10 pixels. But of course, this isn't a CSS course, so I'm not going to stick too long to that. Because why would we want styling when we're working with Bootstrap, am I right? The nice part here is also, it's very easy to give it a label or just not give it a label. Where with HTML, it was also a little bit difficult to do that. Here we just say 80%. And this here is very easy to manage in JavaScript as well. And of course, the only downside is this wouldn't be in the center of this progress. It will just kind of be there, which is disgusting. But I think to get it in the center, you could possibly do that. No, that will not get in the center. That sucks. But there is a way to get around that. I'm just not in a mood to figure that out at the moment. But as easy as that, you have added this right here. So now we go 50, it will say 50. And that's very easy to manage with JavaScript, where you make this increase while this increases. And then I'm not going to stay too long with this, but of course you can go BG and then change the background to, let's say, success. And now it's a green progress bar, or danger. And now it's a red progress bar. Now you're a hacker. But yet again, we've gone through the colors a billion times. We just have to go through it again. Now, even without CSS, you already get a lot of things out of the box. For example, maybe you want it to be striped. Well, progress bar striped. And now it's a striped progress bar. Or maybe you want to animate the stripes moving, because a lot of people like doing that. Well, progress bar animated. Now it's animated, and you didn't even have to write a single line of CSS or JavaScript to get an animated progress bar. And of course, just because it's a progress bar doesn't mean you have to use it as a progress bar. For example, let's say you're working with disk space. Let's just remove all of this there. And here we can say width is 30%. And then we copy this. And here we say 10%. And here we say 20%. That's 30, 40, 50, 60. Meaning we have 40% over, so 40. And here we can say this is success, or we can add the background here, BG, success, and we can add a background with all of them. And here we can just go like that, boom. And instead of success, this one can just be blue. And then instead of success here, we can have danger. And then instead of success here, we can have secondary. Now, and of course, it's just remove this secondary here. Maybe make it dark. There we go. And now we have a progress bar that's filled up to the brim. And we just need to change all of these widths as well to match their given widths. And 40. And now, boom. So here we can say this is free space. This here could be Linux, because that's maybe your Linux partition in your space. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just ignore me. This here could be corrupted. And in this here could be unpartitioned. Anyhow, so now we have a little graph that's showing us how much free space we have on our disk. How much of the disk is taken up by our operating system, in my case Linux. How much of my disk is currently corrupted, and how much is just unused everywhere. So this is just an example of what you can use. It doesn't need to be something with disks, but it's just to show you, just because it says progress bar doesn't mean you're limited to making it a progress bar that loads from one point to the other. Cool. And then last but definitely not least, we can take a look at another thing that allows us to view progress. Well, not really view it, but you get my point. A loader. Now, usually when you want to create a loader, especially with CSS, it's a hassle, to say the least. I hate creating loaders from CSS. I'd use a library any day to instead do it with one line of code, like we're going to do now, by saying dot spinner border. And we covered this a little bit in a previous tutorial, but now we have a spinner or a loader. And here we can also change the color of the spinner by saying text and then the color. I don't know why it's text specifically. I think it's just so there's fewer classes they had to make when they created this, but it's fine. And here we can say something like primary, and now it will be blue, or danger, and now it will be red. Yeah, that is danger. And as I said before in the previous tutorial, it can just be grow as well, and now it will plop, 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 instead of spinning. Some people don't like it when it spins. I guess I understand. And of course, just like in a previous tutorial, we can make it shrink by going SM, and now it will be nice and small. And of course, if we change this to border, then it will be a small loader. And we can put this inside of a button like we did in a previous tutorial, and. So this is also the basics of a spinner. There's not too much about them really, and there's probably more you can use, but for right now, this is more than what we need anyways. So you may notice when you go onto a website like Xhamster, no, I meant to say an older looking website, that usually if it contains a video or a lot of content, you have the option to navigate pages. For example, you're on page 1 and you want to go to page 5, then you can click page 5. Or if you don't find a video good enough, you usually go up until page 28 or whatnot. Now we can do the same, and that is called pagination. It allows you to move between pages. And Bootstrap kind of has something built in for it already. We can create a UL tag for an unordered list and then just give it a class of pagination. Then in here, every item will be our pagination. So we can say ally.page item for pagination item. And in that ally, we can have an A tag with the class page link, because this will contain the link. And it will not go anywhere, and we can just say page 1. Or this can be previous, because sometimes you want to go to the previous page. 1, 2, 3, and then next. And in here we can of course go 1, 2, 3, and next. And as simple as that, we have created our pagination, which usually would be used to navigate between pages. So here we'll go to a previous page, you click that, go to page 1, page 2, page 3, and then next. Now usually the user won't know what page they're on unless they look at the URL. So instead, what you can do is you can say which one should be active. And let's say they're on page 2 and you say active. Now they'll know they are on page 2. And I gave it to the wrong class. See, that's what happens when you don't clean up your code. They just do that. That's much easier to see. We want to add it after page item. There we go. And now you'll know you're on page 2 because it is the active one currently there. Now sometimes they're already on page 1. If they're on page 1, then previous should be disabled. And we've already learned about this one, so we can just say disabled. And now it's disabled because they're currently on page 1, which is neat. Now sometimes you want to make it nice and big because the people you might be marketing to or be trying to show your pagination to might be a little bit old and can't see well or something like that. Well, then you go pagination LG, and this will make the pagination super big. And then of course you have SM to make it super small, because sometimes you want it to be a bit more minimalistic and not take up that much space. Now usually you'll have your videos at the top and your pagination will not be aligned to the left side. That's just weird. I don't know anyone that does that. So we'll justify it. Justify, content, and then center. And this will center it, instead of having it here at the left, which is just gross. And you can of course say end if you want it to be at the right, or start if you are one of those that prefer it at the start. Yeah. Okay, now that is for the bottom pagination that you'll usually use, but you also have a pagination that you often use at the top of a page. But this one is usually what you'd see at the bottom, but at the top you usually have like a pathway of where you're going to. Well, that's still possible, and you can make it look different. So here we'll still have, instead of pagination, we can change this to breadcrumb, because it's almost like Hansel and Gretel, where they left the breadcrumbs to tell them where they were coming from. And instead of page, we can change this to breadcrumb. And we don't really need a link anymore, so I'm just going to remove all of these links because they're only cluttering up the screen. There we go. And now you have a pagination, but that has like slashes next to show you where you are. For example, usually you won't have a previous here, so we can actually remove that from here. And let me just go like this. Okay, now that's easier to see. Now here you could say videos, cosplay, and I'm not going to go more because I can't think of another thing you might have in here. And then Sweet Cosplay GF. And now you'll know you're in Sweet Cosplay GF. But it doesn't really look like that, so it's kind of difficult to see. So here you can just add active, and this will make it look like the active one. And you should of course just remove your A tag, otherwise it's going to still register it as a link. And I know if you want to go back to videos, you just click here and it will take you back to videos. If you want to go to the cosplay section again, you can go to cosplay. And here, that's where you currently are at. This might be even something different, like let's say maybe an ID of some sort. But yeah, that's just an example of something you usually see at the top instead of the bottom. But that is also navigation or some sort of pagination. So page navigation, pagination. So let's start with creating a basic list group just so we know what we're working with. We can create a UL because this is going to be an unordered list with the class name of list group. And then we also inside of that want an li tag with the class name of list group item. So right here, then of course we can say anime, let's say this is like our hobbies, gaming, coding, and here we go. If we were to just say BG dark, then here you'll be able to see our list group. It has a little very fine line here in the center, and yeah, it's just a list. As simple as that. You can also make one of them active, so active like this, and now it's blue because it's active. You could possibly make it that on hover they become active, so if you hover over gaming it gets the active class, and if you hover over coding it gets the active class, but that's a more JavaScript than Bootstrap. You can also create a list group with linked items. We could do that by changing UL to div, and then the items inside of them to A. So we'll go A, and we can still have our list group item, and then we can add list group item action. So this is if there's supposedly an action that will happen. And in here we could just keep that the same, and we can just give it a link to which it should go to. In this case we can just say hashtag. And now if you hover over them, you'll see that they do highlight. And if you click them, they're supposed to take you to the URL passed in here. And you can of course easily disable them or give them disabled styling by saying disabled. And now they're disabled. If we just have one that's not disabled, then you'll notice this one does not look disabled until you actually hover over it. But yeah, as you can see, these two don't have any finger pointing towards them and they're grayed out. If you don't like these borders, it is fairly simple to remove them. I'm just going to make these a little bit less so everything can fit on one line. Oh, that's close enough. Then here with list group you say list group flush, and this will make it more flushed out, so now it's not as round as it was. If we were to remove that, you'll notice it goes around, it's a bit more of a border. You can also add automatic numbering to them, so if we say list group numbered, then it will automatically number them for you. However, I think for that to work, we do need to use an ordered list with li tags, like that. And now they will be numbered. Without this, it will remove the numbering. So if you have an ordered list, you can just do that. If you instead wanted these to be next to each other instead of underneath each other, you could go list group horizontal. And now they're next to each other instead of underneath each other. So if you want them to be stacked horizontally instead of vertically, this is the way to go. And then yet again, just like with everything, we can say list, group, item, and in the color. So success, or danger, or info, and then that will change their colors. And that's mostly the basics of list groups. Usually you'll mostly find them being vertical, as such, and then maybe have a little badge here at the side with a number, and then usually if you click them it will take you to a page, or it will unwrap and it will have content inside of it. Let's create a basic card. Here we already have an image. You can go get any image you want. Now creating a card is pretty simple. We can just say a card, and instead of that we just need a card body with the content of whatever you want. For example, this is my card. Just like that. And now you have a basic card. Now a card can have 3 locations in it. It can have the header, the content, and the footer, similar to HTML, where you have the head, the body, and then the footer. Or if you're in the body, you have the header, body, and footer, or main. Anyhow, we can make them appear by saying card header, and then this is the header, and then we can have one for footer and footer. Now there's a header, there's the body, and then there's the footer. And of course you can change the color of these cards by going BG and then your color. And now it will be blue. Or danger. That would be red. Great. Now for the most part you're probably going to work inside of this card body, so let's stick with that. Now you can create a lot of things in here. For example, let's go H4 and we can call this a card title. So this will be the title of the card. So here we can say Lucy Macwell. Now we have a title for the card. And then we can of course have a card text, which is inside of a p tag. And this will be the text of a card. Great worker always brings the best. And of course we can add a few links if you wanted to by going a.card link. And in here we can just go hashtag profile, and then maybe one going to her website. And now we have 2 links here, and it just looks great in general. Now since we're building a profile here, why don't we add maybe an image to this card? So let's go maybe above the body, and we can add an image with the class of card image top. Here we can just say profile, that's the source. The source is just image.jpg. And in here we can just say profile image. And of course we just limit the width so it doesn't go over the screen width we want to dedicate for it. So style width, and here we can maybe make it 200. And there we go. So now it has a little profile picture right here at the top. If you wanted to maybe move it to the bottom, you could go underneath the body and you could say bottom. And now it will be at the bottom of the card, whichever you mostly prefer. However, some people do actually like the image to be behind the text. So let's say this was a top image, move it here. And in this div, we change it from card body to card image overlay. So you can do this as well. However, I don't really recommend this as much. Maybe you're building a gallery and you need the text to be on top of an image. That I could understand. However, this usually causes things to be a bit more difficult to read. For example, here with this website, it already became a little bit difficult here at the side. So I usually recommend top or bottom. But if the time counts for it, then you could do it on the image itself as well. But then I'd usually keep the text to a minimum, since it could be hard to read depending on what the text is and what the image is. So let's jump right in. We can create a div with a class of Dropdown. And in here, all of our items for the button will finally be placed. So we need the button itself, which will be a button with the class of btn primary, and then just drop down toggle, because this will toggle the drop down for us. And then click me to toggle, and then here we have our toggle button. Currently it doesn't quite toggle anything, but we have the button. We can then create the menu itself by going UL and giving it a class name of dropdown menu. And then with each li element, we need an a tag, or it doesn't necessarily need to be an a tag. It can be any tag. But usually when you have a drop-down button, it will link you somewhere, and that's where the a tag comes in. So li, and then an a tag inside of each one with the class of drop-down item. And you can just give it some text. We can then just copy and paste this a few times. You can say text1, or that should be text1, but okay, and then like this. Now when we click here, it should be toggling. And you know what? We should just specify that it is a toggle button by going data, BS for Bootstrap, and then toggle. And it will toggle drop down. Cool. Now we go like this. There's our text. And that's a basic drop down. We can also add a drop down divider by just going li and just putting an HR tag in here with the class of drop down divider. And this will create a divider for us. So when we create another drop-down item, you just go here and say another item. Then now there's a nice divider here, and underneath it, another item. We can also specify titles or headers for each section here by just going here, li, and then in h5, this will just determine the size, and then drop-down header. And in this heading, and now we have a header. Let's add another header right here, and we can say following header. And now here we have a header, and here we have another header. You can also have enabled and disabled items. So by default they're just regular, so normal, and then we can also have active and then disabled. Now we have a blue one because it is active, and then we have a disabled one which looks like it's not clickable, but take note, this is just styling purposes. This is still clickable, but it looks disabled. You can also specify where to it should be dropped down into. So here we could maybe just go margin left 5, or just margin. And I have a nice margin here where we can really see what's happening. So then here, let's try and make it drop down to the side here. So here we can just add another item saying drop end. And this will mean we're going to drop down to this side, as you can see. And I'll drop down to this side. You can also go drop start, and it will do the opposite and now drop down at this end. Well, there's not enough space, but if we were to add more space, by just quickly adding some styling, then now that should be enough space for the drop down to appear. And there we go. Now the drop down finally appears on this side. You can also align the drop down. So if we were to just remove this and maybe make this much longer, so just giving it some lorem, and it needs to be this long. Then if we click here, and we were to just remove this drop start, you'll notice it's aligned to the left. But we can also make it aligned to the end or to the right by saying drop down, menu, end. Then when we click it, it will be aligned to the right. And that is the basics of a drop down in Bootstrap. Very simple, but also very effective and very useful. So a drop down is very similar. You have something that is hidden, and then once you click here, it is no longer hidden. However, it mainly contains more buttons that you can click. It could do something else, but in general, that's about what it contains. Instead, it would be cooler if we have like a piece of text we could hide until we need it. So uncollapse it. Let's do that. Let's create a button with the class name of btn primary, and this button can just have collapse, or rather uncollapse, because we're going to mainly uncollapse something here. Then we need two things. First, we need to say it's a toggle and the type of toggle it is. So data BS for Bootstrap toggle, and this means it's a toggle button. And we can just say collapse, because it's a toggle for a type of collapse. And in the target, we want to collapse or uncollapse. Data, BS, and then target. And here we can just say hashtag, because we're going to be targeting by ID, and we can just say target. This can be anything you want. Save that, and we'll have a nice button. Now let's create a div with the class name of target, and this should be whatever you have put in here. This class or this ID should be whatever you put in there, and we can give it a class of dot collapse, and we can just add some lorem. Save that, and here we now have a collapsible. As simple as that. So this ID here, this target, is very important, because this target here is what this is referring to. And in this collapse here is the type. So we want it to be collapsible. Very similar to the previous tutorial when we had dropdowns, but this time it's mainly collapsing. Now we can take this a step further and create an accordion. Now that we know the basics of collapse. So we can create a div with the ID of accordion. And then we can create a div inside of this div with the class of card, and then a div inside of this with just the card header, and then an A tag that has a class of btn for the button like styling, and with the content of topic 1. Here we go. It doesn't need to go anywhere, so we can just remove that. And here we can just make sure it knows it's a toggle. And this could also be a button if you wanted to, but an A tag generally looks better. So here we can just say data BS toggle is equal to collapse. Hey, let's give it an href attribute that goes to topic 1. Okay. Now here we can create the collapsible. So we can then just say collapse 1 with the class of collapse, and we can specify dot show. So the show class, which will automatically show it instead of automatically hiding it. And instead of this, we can just have another div with the class of card body, and here we can just have some lorem. We can then also add a data BS parent, and this parent will generate an accordion for us. So we can go hashtag accordion, and this hashtag accordion is referring to this here. Awesome. So let's see, we have this. So this is an accordion. Currently it doesn't do much yet, but let's create 2 more of these just so we can get a full idea of it. There's 1, there's 2, and then this time instead of saying collapse show, we just say collapse. Same here. So they will be collapsed by default. And this will be topic 2. So you just go here, say topic 2. And this should be topic 1 right here. You can make this topic 2. Or actually, the one above it should be topic 2. The text is just so big. Okay, and in here we can make this topic 1, and then just change the last one to say topic 3. So we have 3 topics we currently have. We can then change this third one to say topic 3 in the text, and this one to say topic 2 in the text. Now when we go back to our page, we now have this. Isn't this amazing? So when we click on this, it will collapse and uncollapse as needed. The power of Bootstrap made an accordion just a few lines because of the classes. And that's the basics of collapse in Bootstrap. So these navigation menus makes it easy to create beautiful looking navigations on your website. So let's get started with a very basic one. Let's create a unordered list with the class of nav, and then an li tag with the class of nav item, and we just times that by 2, and then let's add an a tag with the class name of nav link. Here we go. It doesn't really need to link anywhere, but the idea is there. So here we can just say maybe home or page 1, page 2. And let's create one more just for the heck of it. And then page 3. And this will create a very basic but nice looking navigation option. Currently, I don't think they really respond to them because none of them has an anchor. So we just go href, make that hashtag. Then they should look more beautiful. Yeah, there we go. Now we have a pointer and we can click. Not that they do anything, but the idea is there. You can also disable them by just going disabled. And this will give it a disabled styling. You can also then align it by going justify, content, center. And this will justify the content to the center of the page. And of course you can do the same with end, and this will do it to the end of the page. If you wanted to go downwards in a vertical way instead of a horizontal way like this, instead of just doing nav, what you could do is you could say flex column. And this will flex it so it goes downwards instead of from side to side. Now this is nice and all, but currently the styling still lacks quite a lot. So let's make it look a little bit better by going here and saying nav tabs, and let's make this one active. Now we have beautiful navigations, and they are tabs. So depending on which one you make active, it will change which one is here. As you can see now, this one has this little square here. Of course, you generally use JavaScript to switch which one is active, but this is just nice to have that styling right out of the box. You of course have your normal navigation button type things, which will just be pills. And now, as you can see, they're basically just buttons. Now back to our previous tabs example here. Whilst I did say we do need JavaScript for this, we could also use Bootstrap for it, because it's Bootstrap. To implement it, all we need to do is we just have to go here to our A tags, data, Bootstrap, BS, toggle, and we will just say this is a tab toggle. And in here we can just give it actual place it has to go to. So this can go to maybe, let's say home, info, purchase, or prices. There we go. And you can just name them accordingly. And it's by default just make home active. Now we can write their content. So we are going to create a div right underneath these, and we can just say tab content, and this will contain another div with the class name of tab pane container active, and with an ID of home. And we can times this by 3, since we need 3 of these. And then we can just put some lorem here. Lorem. And here we can say this is info. And this isn't going to show anything since it will be disabled, so we can just do that. Then we also have info and prices, and we can just paste them here. And here with these active, we can just say fade. So this will be the animation they come in and go out with. In this case, fade. Now if we were to go here and we click on info, you'll notice they have a nice fade in as you switch between them. If we were to remove this disabled here at prices, then now we can go to prices as well. And of course this works exactly the same if you were to have pills. So pills, and now as you can see we have pills, and we go like this. It works exactly the same. Now, whilst a nav and a navbar may sound very similar, in Bootstrap they are actually different. A nav in Bootstrap is a navigation link, whilst a navbar refers to the bar itself where you put navigation on. So let's get an example here. We can create a div with the class of navbar and then navbar expand sm. This is an optional one, but it will make the navbar expand the entire screen. And then of course you can choose the coloring you want, such as BG light or BG dark. Cool. Then in here we want a div with the class name of container fluid, and then a UL tag with nav bar nav that has a few li tags in it with the class name of nav item. We can maybe make 3. And in here we can just put a tags with the nav link class. That just says link, and it doesn't necessarily need to go anywhere. Link 1, link 2, and link 3. Here we go. And you should see a navbar like this. It's actually expanding the entire screen here. So if we were to just go here and say BG dark, you'll notice it expands the entire screen. And if we were to remove this expand here, you'll notice it now just kind of plops here. So when you say expand, it will expand it so it goes like this for the entire screen instead of from top to bottom to the entire screen. However, oftentimes you don't want your links to just be there at the top left. It's somewhat boring. You can easily center it by just adding the justify content center class, and I will of course justify so the content is in the center. And my bad, this should be inside of this container fluid div here, and I will justify the content to be in the center. Now we've already talked a bit about coloring here, so you have dark, primary, secondary, all of the colors you would usually have. We usually cover this a lot, so I'm not going to go over it again. And of course you have your link type, so you have active and you also have disabled like that. And now you'll notice, oh, that's very difficult to read. Let's maybe go from primary back to dark, and there you go. Now generally when you do something such as BG primary, you want to set the navbar's theme color to something different, such as navbar, and that will make sure that if this happens we can still see everything here. So as you can see, we can actually see this. But without this, since it will not be themed in a dark way for this background primary here, we'll just see this and you can't read that. But if you add this navbar dark, it will allow us to make this a little bit more visible. You can of course add a logo by going right here inside of this div and then going A with the class name of Navbar brand. And its href can just be in hashtag. And then of course you can have your logo here. And I will put a logo for you onto the navbar. Now generally you actually want a real logo in here, so I do have an image, tree.png, just a square image with a tree in it, that we can put in here where this logo is. So we can just go here and say image, and the source can just be tree.png here, and the alt can be logo. And if we save this, it will not look quite as we expect because the image is pretty big. So we might just want to go with, and I believe 40 is automatically in pixels, and yes it is. And there we go, there's our little tree logo, and that's not really nice blue color, so I'm going to just go BG dark again. And there we go. So there's a nice tree logo for us. You can also have navbar text if you need it. So let's go here and we can just say span.navbar text. And we can go save trees. This could be like our company name or something. And now we should have a piece of text here. And we can just say navbar dark, just to make sure we can actually see it there. And there we go, save trees, and there's our logo next to it, and then with link 1, link 2, link 3. Now currently when our screen width goes very low, our navbar expand will switch from expanding back to drop down. So here as you can see now it's a drop down. Generally when this happens you most likely have a mobile device. And when you have a mobile device, you want to have a navbar toggle instead, because generally this large navbar will have more than just 3 links, or it might have 10 links on it, and then you don't want that to be constantly in the user's face. So we can go in here and let's go right underneath here. We can create a button, and this button will have a class of navbar toggler, and this will toggle our navbar to kind of drop down like that if it's on a small screen. And then we can go type is equal to a button. We specify this in case we have a form, then we won't try and submit data. And in data bootstrap toggle, and we can just say collapse because it should toggle a collapse function. And we can just say what it should be toggling, so data bs target, and we want to target the item with the ID, which we'll add in a second, collapse me. So right here. Then here we can just add an ID if we create a div with the ID of collapse me. And you can of course just move this UL into this div, and there we go. Now to finish off the button, we want to give it a little icon. So let's just go in here and give it a span. This span will have a class of navbar toggler icon. So it will be an icon to help us toggle this navbar provided to us by Bootstrap. Then this collapse me can also have a few classes because it is a special type of div now. It should be able to collapse. So we can say collapse navbar collapse, and now we should have a collapsible navbar. Click here, and as you can see, it collapses and uncollapses when the screen gets small, but when the screen gets big again, it will go back to normal. Now, of course, if we were to change this from SM to MD, then our screen will much quicker decide to go into drop-down mode. So we go here, plop, as you can see it much sooner this time. Now we're in drop-down mode. If we go like this, there we go. You can have more types of things in this drop-down, such as a drop-down button, but that's pretty self-explanatory given everything we've already done. Let's go to something a bit more extreme, such as a search. Sometimes you want to have a search in your navbar. This is a very common thing you want to usually have. So I'm going to go down here to underneath this div. You could put it in the div if you want to, because then on mobile screens it will be in this collapsing div. That would actually be better, but for our purposes we're just going to skip that. We can create a form with the class of bflex, and it will just flex the form so things are in the center and it can easily break and whatnot. Not like break the how it looks, just break apart if needed. And everything will be next to each other. And you can have an input with the class of form control, and then me-2. It will be of type text, and we can give it a placeholder of search. And you can of course have a button of the class name of btn primary, that just has a search. Now we go here, we have a beautiful search bar here at the right side navigation, and if we make it smaller it will look like this. Generally you actually want this search bar to be, depending on your website of course, it will change from website to website, but you generally want it to actually be in here so it appears like this when you flip it open. But it's also up to you, it depends on the website. Some websites might need that search bar there, some may not. Now let's say we have the rest of the page. I'm going to go br times, let's go 30. So here are 30 break lines. They should give us a nice scroll. And you'll notice we lose our navbar. Some websites need the navbar to be there all the time. If this is the case for your website, all you need to do is go to your navbar here and say fixed top. And now when you scroll, it will be fixed at the top. As you can see here, I'm scrolling because my scroll bar is moving up and down. And it will always be there, so it will always be visible. You can also fix it to the bottom instead. Some newer sites like to have their search bar at the bottom because mobile phones are getting so popular. Now when you do this, it will always be at the bottom and it will also never hide. So if you go like this, scrolling doesn't do a thing. And then let's maybe add a few more break line tags here. Just br times 90. Okay, that's good. And now we have a nice, decently long scroll. Now you can also give this navbar a sticky position. So we can just say sticky top. Then when the user gets to this navbar, and this doesn't necessarily have to be a navigation bar, it can just be like a little pop-up that you stay on the screen. A lot of websites has these, especially when they like offer cookies and they want to force you to accept the cookies, and you scroll, then you have this like sticky thing in front of your screen the whole time. Then now if we go here, we just add a lot of text. So let's just go p lorem times 90. That's a lot of text. 90 is maybe a little bit too much, but that's fine. We can scroll past it. Wow. Okay. And that's a little bit of a lot of text. I'm just going to take a little snip out of it. And then at the bottom, we can also add just a little bit of this lorem. Okay. There we go. Now when we scroll, you'll see here is our navigation menu. If we scroll here, as you see, it stays there even as we scroll. But when we scroll up and pass where it was, it just goes back there. So this is a nice sticky way. I actually love this effect. I just don't really love how people are using it these days. So let's create a form. And the action, we don't need an action because we're not really going to be using this form. And in here we can just style it a little bit. So we can create a div with the class of margin bottom free and then margin top free. So we'll give it a nice margin. And then here we can just add a button with the class name of btn primary and just submit. Okay. Now in here we can actually put all of our things we might want in a form. For example, we can have a label with the class of form label, and that just contains email. And you can just say it's for email. Then we can have an input with the class name of form control and an ID of email and a type of email. And you can say the type is email. Now already you'll see this actually looks pretty good, except for the fact that it stretches the entire screen, but already it looks pretty decent. Like, this is much better than the default input you usually have. Let's create another div with a margin bottom of 3. And we can create another div that says form check and margin bottom 3. Then this first div, we can do the same as what we did here for email, but now it can be for a password. And take note, if you're not comfortable with HTML yet, this 4 here is referencing this ID here. So if we were to change this to SSS, we'll need to change this to SSS. This just means if you click on the label, then it will automatically put the cursor on this input field. And in here, we could just add a checkbox. So we can say form check label. And this can actually be a label. And inside of here, we can have an input of checkbox with the class name of form check input. So yet again, it's just form what you need. In this case, you want a checkbox, a form check, and then what you want. In this case, you want a label for that checkbox, and we want an input for that checkbox. Here we go, and we can just not have a 4 in this case. Don't need a name. And we don't really need an ID either. And in here, we can of course just say remember. Now, this is provided by Bootstrap. This design here is automatically provided by Bootstrap, which is amazing because it already looks very good and it works amazing out of the box. If we were to go here and just say class is equal to container fluid, then we'll have a nice border, a nice padding. And then what we could do here is we could say we have a div with the name row. And now if we were to move all of this into this row div, and we were to give each of these divs the class of column, then now it's in one line. So if you want to do an inline sort of thing, you can. In this case, it doesn't look very nice because we didn't really put a lot of effort into this. You can also change the sizes of these inputs. For example, let's rather have another input here. And this one can be username. And then you can resize it to whichever size you need. So here we could say form control. And then form control, and in the size you want, such as SM or LG. So this one will be LG, the regular size, which is like MD, and then the smaller size, which is SM. If we take a look at it, you'll notice they shrink considerably as you move. It's up to you which you prefer. Let's talk about a few components you can use inside of this. So let's say you want a select. Now generally you'd have an option, and we just say times 3, that should work fine. 1, 1, 2, 2, 3. If we were to view this, you'll have a nice little ugly drop down here. However, if you use Bootstrap, then you have the option to say select with the class of form select. And now it's a nice select. As you can see, it just looks better in general. And there, I think that's much easier to read. So now I can actually see how it looks. Sometimes you want boxes you can check. Not like a checkbox, but something more like a switch. To do that, we can have a class or a div with a class of form check form switch with an input of type checkbox and a class name of form check input, and the label, the class of form check label. And here you could say send emails. So let's say you allow your users to turn emails on or off. So you'll send them like marketing emails. This is a great way you can use this. And then we can just go here and say by default it can be checked. And you can say value is equal to yes. And we can give it an ID of xxx. And in here we can just say for, and we just specify xxx. You can put whatever ID you want in there. I'd rather skip through that part. And here you go. And of course, add dark background with dark text. Not very smart. Here we go. Send emails. Click on it. You can see very nice animation to turn it on and off. You can also have a very good looking range. So let's say we have an input, and this is just a type range. Now by default, the range in HTML lacks a little bit beauty. But in Bootstrap, it looks pretty good. So let's go class. And can you guess what this will be called? Form range. Just with everything Bootstrap, it follows a basic rule set in a sense. We know this goes on a form, and we want a range that goes on that form. As you can see, here we have a nice looking range. That's very interactive when you touch it. You can also have input groups. So if we were to go here, we can just say dot input group, and you can just create a span with the class name of input group text. You put an @ symbol, and here we can create an input with a class of form control and a placeholder for, let's say, their username. Then we'll take a look here. Now it's an @ symbol by default on the front, and you can put someone's username here. If you want it to be at the back instead, then you could go here and we can just move this downward. So before the input and then after the input now at gmail.com. And now we can just say email. And now here we can say mark, and this will be mark at gmail.com. And you're not limited to only having one. You could do something like this. So you could, let's say you have a domain. So you can say get pizza dot, and then now if they create an email, it would be get pizza dot, let's say mark at gmail.com. You're not limited at all. You can even have one more here, and here we could say dot pizza saga, and now it will be get pizza dot satsa dot pizza saga at gmail.com. Very weird email, but that is possible. You could even put a checkbox in here. It doesn't need to be text specifically. And now if we go here, and this can just be some sort of text such as include this. And then now include this, and you can check this checkbox, and then you can like type something in here, I guess. And that could also be a button. It doesn't need to be a checkbox or just text. It can be whatever you want, you can put in there. So in this tutorial, we'll be taking a look at the carousel, or in other words, the slideshow. So for this tutorial, you might want to have maybe 3 horizontally or vertically. Both will work as long as they're all somewhat the same width. It would be good. Now the carousel takes quite a lot of boilerplate code, so let's start with it. First, we want to just have an ID, and we can call this slide for like slideshow. And then we can give it a class of carousel, and then also slide. And in here, we can say data, BS for Bootstrap, ride, and we can just specify carousel. Then in here we want to kind of have the indicators to which way you're going, because you usually want the user to be able to see, all right, or can they go left, can they go right, what's going on. So we can just create a div with the class of carousel indicators, and this contains 3 buttons, and we can just say data BS target, and this will target and then we want to go this slide. So I'm going to say hashtag slide. Data BS slide to, and this will tell it where to slide to. We can say 0, so it will slide it to the first. We start at 0 because generally in programming you start at index 0. So with 0 it will go to the first target, so the first image. And we can just give it a class of active. We can then do somewhat the same thing for the rest here. We can just copy this and paste it 2 times. Then all we need to change is where it slides to. And we can also remove this class because it won't be active by default. Next up, we need to have the slideshow itself, so like the images that's being slide around. We can create a div with the name carousel inner. And inside that, we want another div with the class name of carousel item and also the class name of active. So this will be the first item, the first image to be shown. So we can just say img, and the source can be 1.jpg, and that's the image we have here. I'm not going to put an alt here, but generally you want to put an alt there. We can say class is equal to d block and w100. You say width 100. And now we can just copy and paste this 2 more times. We can just remove this active from these last 2. And in here we can say 2 and 3. Now we have our images. Now if you just want to go like this, it is perfectly fine. And these images are a little big, as you can see here. So you can maybe just restrict their height. I'm just going to go here and give it a quick style or a quick height. And we can just make it 500. That will make it an easy way to kind of force them to be smaller. There we go. Here are the indicators we talked about. So if you click on them, they will slide through them. So this one will go to the first image because it's indicator with this 0. So we go here. It's this one. So we'll go to 0. And as you can see, we have a nice slide. Generally, you also want buttons on the side to make the user able to click on the button on the side and it will go left to right. To do that, you can have a button with the class carousel control prev, and this will mean previous. And here you can just have a span with the class of carousel control prev icon. This will put an icon that goes backwards. So it will basically put this there. Then for the button, to give it functionality, we can say data bs target is equal to hashtag slide. And in data bs slide is equal to prev for previous. We can then copy and paste this. So now we have this previous again, but now instead of previous, we just say next, and we can save. Now when we look here, we have 2 nice buttons. They're a little bit difficult to see with this background here, but they are there if we click here, and now they're a bit easier to see. So as you can see, they allow us to easily scroll through these without needing to click these. But you can, if you want to, just click here and you can go there. You can also give each of these a title. To do that, we can go here to where it says carousel item, and for each one you want to give them their own title. So after the image, we can just say div with carousel caption. We can have an h3 or an h4 or an h2 depending on how big you want it, and we can just say epsom here and then p, a good looking image. And we can of course just copy and paste this, and now here we can put lorem stas, and in here we can have stas ipsum, and then a good looking image 3 and then 6. Now they will have these nice looking captions on them. Go to the next one, you'll see the captions change to what we gave them. So let's start off with a model. A model is just like a little pop-up that will show you some information. So let's create a button, and this button will show us the model. So when we click it, it will show us the model. Open model. There we go. And it's actually modal with an A. We can then add some Bootstrap JavaScript to it. So we don't have to write any JS, we just say data, BS, toggle, and we can just say to toggle model. And you can also say data, BS, target, and here you can say info model. Cool. Now we can actually create the model. So you can just have a class of model and an ID of info model with another div inside of it with the class of model dialog. Inside of that, a div with model content. And we should change it from info model to info modal. There we go. And here we can start styling what's happening inside of this model. So we can give it a header by going and creating a div called model header. In here we could put something such as an h4 with the class name of model title. And here we could say cheese pizza. And in here we could maybe give it a body by going model body. And we can say a very tasty pizza with lots of cheese. Nice. And then of course you have the option to give it a footer as well. So let's say we want to give it a close button. So here you can say model footer, can create a button, btn, and then btn danger that just says close. And here to give it functionality, we can again just go data BS, but this time dismiss. And we can just say model. We can actually do the same here for the header. So you can also have a close button at the top, which is very nice. However, this time we can say class is equal to btn close. It'll give it as a little close button. Doesn't need any text. And here we go. Now if we go and look at what we've done, we have a button, we click on it, we get cheese pizza, a very tasty pizza with lots of cheese, separated by these little lines here. It's horizontal lines. You also have your close button on the footer and a close button here at the top. Both of them will close this model. You can also add animation to it by going fade, and now the model will fade in and out. As you can see, I really love this animation. You can also make the model bigger or smaller by going something such as model SM or model XL or LG. You know all of these size things. We've covered them quite a bit in the past. So here you have an XL. And if you want an SM, we can go SM. And actually, this should be on the dialog. My bad. So here we go, model SM. And now it'll be small. Like that. Then you have a very small model. That could be good if you have a very small display. And here we can go LG, and now we'll have a really big one, as you can see here. You can of course also make it full screen. Some people like to have their models full screen, so full screen. And now we open model, and now it's the entire screen. Next up, we can look at toasts. Toasts are like a little message box you have, it will show you some information. So let's just clean up a bit here. Then we can create a div with toast and also the show class, because they will tell to show. You can show it or hide it. And I can have a div with the class of toast header and also a div with the class of toast body. Then here in the header, we can say something such as you won. And you can maybe also give it a close button. So button, btn close. And then it's generally the same thing. Data bs dismiss is equal to toast. So should dismiss this toast. And in here, with the toast body, we can say something such as, you won 45 USD. Not a great win, but it's something. Now here we go. You won. Isn't that pretty cool? So in this tutorial, we'll be taking our blogging website, which we made in HTML, and I'll get to that in a second, and we'll add Bootstrap to it to make it look better. Now, before we get started, first of all, you can find the code in this YouTube projects repository on GitHub. I will leave a link to this in the description. If it's not there, just leave a comment and I'll remember to add it. Then here, instead of HTML, this is our code that we're going to write today. If you want to follow along, you can get this blogging website code. This is the original HTML. This is what I am going to use. If you fall behind or is having a little bit of trouble, you can go here to this blogging website and just get Bootstrap from here. Whatever you might be missing. So let's actually get started. First, I would like to delete everything I have in here, because none of these are important for this tutorial. We'll start from scratch basically, and we'll get this piece of code. There's not a lot, so as you can see, there's not a lot, but how we can get this is you have a few methods. You can either go and copy and paste the code file per file, which is a long and tedious process, but it is possible. Or you can go here. You might actually not be able to see that. Okay, let me resize this. But for some reason, when you're on a small screen, it just disappears. So here you have a code button. You're going to go with HTTPS method, or you can download a zip file and just extract that zip file and use it. SSH or GitHub CLI. If you don't know how to do any of this, just go and copy and paste the code over to your screen and you'll be good to go. Just download every individual file then. However, I'm going to use this. So what I can then do is I can open up my terminal, new terminal. You need to have git installed if you want to use this method. Git clone. And then I can just paste that URL. And there we go. Cool. Now you'll have this YouTube project here. All we want is, instead of HTML, we want this blogging website right here. I'm going to move it to outside. And I'm going to delete this folder because I don't need it anymore. Boom. Now we have our blogging website. We can even, to make it simpler, just select all of this, move it outside, and then delete this parent folder. And now we have this, our blogging website, which we did. I do have a tutorial on where we did this blogging website, which in my HTML course, if you go, it's in this full crash course as well, but if you go to the bottom, you'll see create a blogging website. Here we actually create this project. So if you want to watch that, you can, or you can just copy the code because then you don't have to rewrite it. Cool. Now let me resize the page again. And I don't think YouTube likes it when I resize it. And then here we go. All right. So then here we can just say stop live server and then open with live server. So this is the website we have. As you can see, it's literally just bare bones HTML. I'm going to open up all of these files. And you'll also have these images and stuff, but we're not going to use them too much. And then I'm going to close this at the side just to so I have more space. So as you can see, not a lot. This here is this index.html. As you can see, your profile is this profile.html. And then post blog is this post.html. As you can see, very terrible design. Nobody likes to see this. Cool. Now you can just go and Google Bootstrap CDN. And here we can go to first link. Or actually, we can go to getbootstrap.com. This one right here. I think that one is more legit. I don't know really. Then here we have our two things we need to copy. We can copy this one. And we can go here to index.html. And we can go right before, actually right after this one will be good. You can paste that there. Yeah, I don't think you need this integrity right there, so you can just remove it. And same with just this JavaScript. Now I can go here, and you can probably remove this integrity. I don't think it's required. And you should have these two links here. So this is the Bootstrap links. And then we can copy and paste this to all of the other files. So we go here, paste, and we go here and we paste. There we go. Now the website already should look somewhat better. As you can see, it looks a little bit different. If we were to remove this, you'll see it looks like this, but once we add Bootstrap, it adds styling automatically. So it's already a bit better. Cool. Now let's start with this horrible navigation bar here. Let's start from the top and let's create it so it looks better. So we can give it this nav a class, Navbar, and you can say Navbar expand MD, and in BG light. So we're going to give it a light background. Currently doesn't look that great. That's perfectly fine. We're still getting to the good part. Then in here we can give it a container fluid, and then we could possibly add a little bit of branding now. So here we can go Navbar brand, and this can be an A tag, so an attribute tag. And this can just go to index.html. It can just go to the home page. And we can say BP for Blogger's Paradise. Now we have a BP right there. We can also maybe add a toggler button that will toggle whether the nav bar is being shown or not. So here we can say button navbar toggler. And here we can just say span with the class of navbar toggler icon. And in here we can just say this is of type button, optional, don't need to specify that, but I like to. And in data BS toggle, so this will toggle a collapse for us. And in data BS target, and this will be the hashtag collapsible navbar. Cool. Now that we have that, we can create another div, and this can have the ID of collapsible navbar, and in the classes of collapse, navbar, collapse, and justify content center. Then in here we can move our UL to there, to this right here. Now this is getting a little bit difficult to read, so I would like to just resize the text a little bit here. If you're having trouble seeing this and following along, then please go check out the code here. So just HTML right here, and you can still follow along and you can just look at what I did. So here you can still go look at the code. So if you're struggling to see this, just maybe go there. I just want to make it a little bit smaller because HTML indentation is quite big. And now we have this. We click here, we have a drop down navbar. And if we were to resize this, then here we have this. Isn't that epic? Now we can actually modify it a little bit more. Now this UL tag can have a class of navbar, nav, and then just ME4, just to give it a little bit of spacing. And this will just make them next to each other like this. Then here, with each li tag, class of nav item. And this middle one had a little bit of an oops. So let's just go like that and paste it here. And in this A tags here, can also have special classes. Class nav link. And now it looks like this, which looks so much better. Like compared to where we started, this is amazing. And if we were to resize the page, you'll notice it goes into a small little box like this. So if you have a small screen, this is perfect. Next up, we can start working on the rest of the page. So everything after this nav, so take note, after the nav bar, we can just go and say container fluid. So everything else should go into this here. This will give it a nice padding for us. Move this in here. As you can see, now there's a nice little padding here at the side, margin maybe even. Then here in the header, we don't need to give the header anything special, but for the h1, we can give it a class of text center. And then for this p tag, we can say class of text center as well. And this will just nicely center everything for us. And in this one that gives us the top post, we can go in here and we can give it a div with the class name of alert success. We can then just select all of this, move it in here, and now we can just make this either bold, or if you want to, you can say strong. So it's up to you. I generally prefer bold, but I think it's time I mix it up a little bit and use strong. So now top post today. Wow, a car just hit a cloud like a lightning bolt. Next up, we can go to the main stuff. And here we can give this one a class. So this is for each post, how they will look. A border 2, rounded P2, and an MB2. So now they will all have these little boxes around them, borders. And with this H2, we can give it a class of H2, which is not really required. And in here with this span here, we can give it a P tag instead now. And we can say class is equal to block quote footer nt1. And now it will have this nice little design here. For the following p tag, I think that's perfectly as is. And for the buttons, I'm thinking we should make them stand out a bit more because currently they just look terrible. We should maybe align them a little bit and whatnot. So let's create a div called clear fix. This will allow us to align it a little bit. So now we can start adding a few extra classes. This button here can have a class of btn success. And I would like to move this one to below this thumbs down button, which will have the same class, but instead of success, it will have danger because it's the dislike, so it's going to be red. And in here we can just say float end. So this will float it to the end of this block here. This is what the clear fix is for, in case you missed that tutorial. And we have our float end here as well, and we can say me2. Now it will look like this. This is much better and just looks so cool. Let's apply all of this to the rest. And then once you're done with all of that, you have this. Everything looks so much better already. Now personally, I don't think we have to change anything about the footer. So I think this homepage is perfect. Next up, let's maybe go to the profile page. Ooh. Yeah, that does not look very good. So how about we take this nav, we copy it, we go to our profile page, and this nav here, we replace it with what we have created. There we go. Now that nav is there, we don't have to worry about it anymore. Next, what I want to do is I want to replace this form with a div. We don't currently need a form. We can re-add it later once we get to JavaScript and stuff. But right now we don't need a form. Instead, I want to use a div with the class of container and margin top free, margin bottom free. There we go. Now it has a little bit of a container here. Then this field set we can turn into center. Or you could create a div with the class name of center. That should also work. And in here we can create a card. And inside of that, a card body. And here we can have an h4 with the class name of card title. We can then move our John Pazinski into here. I'm going to remove this edit button because I feel currently it's not necessary to have an edit button since we can't use it yet. And now we have that. We can then go here and say card text, and this card text can just contain all of this. And yet again, we don't need this button here because we're not going to edit yet, so it's not necessary. You can paste that there and then remove this part. Then finally, we can move this div and image into this div. So the div right below the card text. And in fact, we can remove this div around the image because we're not going to have this edit button anymore. And now you should see something like this. Now what we can do is we can add a button for someone to follow them. So .clear fix, which will have an A tag with the btn primary float end classes, which says follow. Now you might see this follow and think, but why? Well, we're going to use this later on, so when someone else can view your profile and then follow you. In your case, if you press it, nothing's going to happen. And we can just make this go to hashtag, because we're not going to use it. Then for this image, because it's kind of ugly, what we can do is instead of going here, we can go and say class is equal to card img for image bottom. And now we have this. And then as for this clear fix here, I think it would look better if we were to move it inside of where this text button is, or this text is, like this. But maybe after a p tag. So let's go here to this div and just rename that to a p. We can then move both these into the card body here. Now it should look something like this. And I think this looks amazing. Maybe you could move the bottom to the button to the center, but this is up to you. I think it looks good here at the side. Or maybe even put it here at the top instead. Or remove it if you don't like it. Now isn't that so much more beautiful than what it was? Now let's go here to our post blog page. Ooh. Now I'm going to copy this navbar again. I'm going to post here, and we can just replace this nav with our new navbar. Then here we can create a div with a class of container. And you can just move this form into this div. Now in the source code, you might see that this form goes to a page. Just ignore that. It's not really going to any page. It was just some copy paste code I put there. Now inside of this form, we can have a div with the class name of MB free, so margin bottom free, and MT free, so margin top and margin bottom free. Then now we can have our labels for title with a class of form label. We can remove this BR and move our input upwards. We can now give this a class name of form control. Cool. Now let's do the same for this label and text area. We can move them up, and here we can say class is equal to form label. And as text area, we can say class is equal to form control. And then finally, we can have a button. We're going to move this up. And I think I'm going to change this input to button just for the convenience sake. And in here, I can give it a class of btn primary. Now that is pretty cool, but looks much better. Now one thing I still want, is you'll notice a lot of more popular websites has it. Let's say you're back at home, right? Now you want to search for a specific post, but there's no search bar. Let's add one, and let's add one here inside of the nav. I'm going to go right here to the bottom. So right below this UL tag, and create a form with the class of dFlex to make it flex. And we can give it an input with the class of form control me2, and then a button of class btn primary, and this form action can be to nowhere, and in this input is of type text. There's our classes, and we can just say placeholder is search. And as for this button, we can just give it a little icon by going and then we can say class is fa search. Take note, this here is not Bootstrap, this is Awesome, which is already part of the project. Now if we go here, we have a nice search bar. Now isn't that absolutely epic? You can go search for stuff here now. Click search and it will search. And then if we do this, the search bar hides itself, and now we can view it here. And I hope this gave you a good idea of how powerful Bootstrap can be and what we can do to make Bootstrap make a website look good. As simple as that, now we have all of these nice pages which we can go to. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. And hopefully I'll see you all again in my upcoming CSS course. Toodaloo.